I'm a runner by background, and I still love to run, although I wish I had more time to do so. It's a skill that's like your cardio, right? It's not static, it's highly dynamic. And if you're not constantly training, at least for me, maybe for others it's very different, but at least for me, right? If you're not constantly training and refining it, then you lose it, or at least it depreciates somewhat. Because think about it, like, this is a scenario that I think anyone can relate to. People get busy, you're under pressure, you have a lot of conflicting priorities. You could almost decide things through indecision, which is, I'll just kind of attack things as they come, or I'll try to hit it all as time allows. And as a result, you don't have that sort of Northern Star anymore.
Today on the One Away Show, we are joined by technologist and CEO Ryan Lewis, whose career in national security began with one quiet introduction that changed everything. When Ryan arrived on the East Coast for graduate school, he had no roadmap, just curiosity. That changed the day he met Dr. Jack Gansler, the former head of defense acquisition and a giant in the field. Ryan stepped into his research center and, without realizing it, into the quarter that would define his next 2 decades. In our conversation, Ryan takes us back to those early days studying MRAP deployments during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, work that taught him how acquisition works under pressure and why details matter when lives are on the line. He shares how this foundation shaped his leadership approach, his discipline, and the way he makes decisions today. As the CEO of Rancher Government Solutions, he's helping agencies deploy modern applications securely across cloud, on-prem, and edge environments. If you are curious how someone finds their calling at the intersection of technology, policy, and mission, and how early lessons can echo through an entire career, stay with us. This conversation offers perspective, clarity, and a rare look inside a world where focus truly shapes outcomes. Ryan, welcome to the One Away Show.
Awesome, man. Great to be here, Brian. Thanks for the opportunity.
I feel like I don't know you, but I know so much about you, where you live, or your roots, my roots, it's
in a non-creepy way.
In a non-creepy way. I know it sounded really creepy. But Ryan, what's the one away moment that you want to share with us today?
Yeah, I think, like other folks you've had on the show, and I enjoy listening to them all, but, there's always a couple that jump out at you. And I think the one that, wanted to discuss here, we kind of see where the conversation goes, is the moment that kind of brought me into the industry that, I've worked in almost my entire career, right? So, I grew up in the West, in St. Louis, so go Cards. I came out to the East Coast for grad school. And, at the time, right, a big motivator for me to come out east was just to be a part of what was happening in the city at the time. And I didn't really know anybody. And I didn't even really know exactly kind of what I wanted to do getting started at school. And, my one away moment really started with an introduction to one of our research centers at the University of Maryland. It was called at the time, it's changed its name, but it was called at the time the Center for Public Policy and Private Enterprise. And it was essentially looking at the business of the defense industrial base. And it was run at the time by someone who was both a teacher and became a mentor to me, someone named Jack Gansler. He had worked in and out of the industry as a technologist, and then as an executive. He had been in the Clinton administration, in the Department of Defense, as the head of acquisition. And although, like so many important things in one's life, you don't realize necessarily the magnitude of what's happening at the moment. But when you look back, as you have talked about with many people, Brian, you realize that put me down a path that was extremely consequential. And so, my moment was meeting Jack, his broader team, so Bill Decision, Don Pullman, and ended up, I interviewed with them. I became a research assistant, and from working with him, it really set me on the course of being a technologist supporting the defense industrial base in some capacity. So ever since then, right? Whether I've been an investor, whether I've been a researcher, whether I've been an on-site engineer, or now running a business that serves this industry, while there are many, many variables and people and a lot of moments that kind of drove me to where I am today, I would say one of the key ones was that first research experience with him, and then working with him on sort of my first internship with Computer Sciences Corporation.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's always great when you meet somebody who takes an interest in you and maybe gives you a corridor into a world that is previously uninhibited, and then says, I want to walk right through it and live in this corridor. So that's really special. My question for you is, what were you think you were the research assistant. What were you doing, right, for Jack? Like, what were the activities comprised of? You said, you really, your technology side was really brought out. Like, what were the things that you were doing to say, hey, this is not only a great opportunity, but there's greater application here for my life?
Yeah, it goes part and parcel with one of the motivators that brought me out east in the first place. And so, to wind the clock back to when I first started, so this was in 2007. I at the time, like many people in the city or in the area, had come out with the intent of working in or for the government in some capacity, right? I had at the time, right, had really been focused on supporting or building some exposure into supporting U.S. national security agencies, mainly on the intelligence side. And so that was really my framework, right, at the time. And when working with Jack, what was so consequential about that was, it's hard to remember now because it seems so long ago, and just given the magnitude of everything that's happening, right, just in our current times, it can seem antiquated sometimes a little bit. But in 2007, right, so much of the research institutions, think tanks, and academia, right, were focused on the consequences of the extending conflict in Afghanistan and Iraq. And, in 2007, that was right during the beginning of what is now sort of the infamous surge, right, to put down some of the increased sectarian violence, right, that was occurring in the region. And, for me, who really didn't know anything about anything, right, Jack was really one of the first people, and Bill, the whole team, was really one of the first people that kind of set a context for me that without them, it's a context I still draw upon today, right? Which is, within the whole spectrum of capability that the country brings to any problem, right? Jack was really the first to kind of say, here's kind of industry's role. And within that role, here's all the subcategories, right, that industry can provide support to, or can be enabler, right, to the government, to the warfighter, to the intelligence officer, so on and so forth. And specifically to your question, the one of the first projects was a project that was tied in part to a broader defense science board research initiative, which was looking at how to accelerate the equipping and deployment of mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, or MRAP vehicles, right? So this was an essential vehicle to protect warfighters from improvised explosive devices, right, that were tearing up lightly armored vehicles. And it was, at the time, right, I viewed it was very much sort of the economic study and the cost and the inhibitors, right, to equipping these vehicles, acquiring them, building them, moving them in the fastest way possible. But in retrospect, it was it was a microcosm of how understanding how our industry works at the time, how when the government wants to do something faster, or not just wants, it needs to do something quicker, what are the levers it can pull? And what does that mean from an acquisition side? What does it mean from a workforce side? So on and so on. And so my first project, just supporting him as just one of many people supporting it, really shaped how I looked at the importance of what contractors can provide, whether they're providing a truck, whether they're providing software or services, whatever the case may be. And it is through that lens, right, that really guided a lot of sort of my other work, and certainly even today, right, whether we're doing sort of, enterprise IT or closer to supporting new age applications, never forgetting sort of that Northern Star, that at the end of the day, there is someone that is reliant, or a whole series of stakeholders that are reliant on what you do to execute something, and sometimes in key circumstances. It's critical. And I think anyone that works, right, or supports, or is even tertiarily involved, right, in supporting our national security is something they should never forget, right? And so that first project was very illustrative for me. And again, I can't believe it, but I still look back at some of the old research reports we put out, Brian, like, as just a kind of way to level set, how far things have come, and yet how much was I could still learn from past assignments.
It seems like you're, really, you're working at such an important time in just American history, right? At least in the 2000s, probably the most important time. The front row seat into the work that you were doing, and how maybe it was impacting on the, in the war zones, and had to be incredibly gratifying to have the opportunity and kind of see yourself given an opportunity there. My question for you is, okay, it sounds like you get your hands very dirty in a lot of ways. If you could go back to those moments, you said the word illustrative, like this was very illustrative for me. When you were in that role, can you recall maybe 1 to 2 moments or 1 to 2 experiences that really spoke to you, that said, within this greater picture that I'm in, like, I'm really on the right track. Like, this is really for me long term.
Yeah, I think, especially when you're younger and you don't, for me, like, you had no context for things, right? You're learning so much on the fly. It's hard sometimes to understand, right, the magnitude or the lack thereof of certain types of work that you're doing. And I think one of the key things, right, that was, I think it was eye-opening for me at the time, and that was really over the course of, my entire graduate school experience, supported the research center, even early internship work, was at the time, like, again, it seems maybe somewhat antiquated now, given the current state, but at the time, like, how much policy leaders were reevaluating, right, how to do things faster, more efficiently, how to bring in new services, whether they're, in the MRAP example, right, that's obviously a very complex system, both hardware and software equipment, and a lot of integration effort. But there was a whole sort of early groundswell about what does it mean to attempt to bring in innovation better, faster, cheaper, right? This has been a theme, right? This has been a theme in defense acquisition for a long period of time, right? But the thing that kind of was illustrative to me about, this is an interesting track. This is the right track, or maybe even to put it more simply, Prime, there's a signal here that, when I go home or back to at that time, my tiny basement apartment, and I had a little bit of free moments, what am I researching just because I'm interested, or who am I reaching out to, right, to learn more? And, the thing that really highlighted to me was the amount of analysis that was going into the essentially new, this sounds maybe simple, but the the amount of analysis going into new ways, right, to procure and build technology, because leaders, wherever they work, whether it didn't matter what kind of group they're in, they didn't have the tools at hand to move things fast enough to meet their requirements. And that was a kind of a big indicator to me at the time, not just me, a ton of people, that, you know, this whole industry is changing, right? And you kind of hit these moments, just like in tech, right? You had these moments for something that's exciting, and then it kind of goes through mass adoption, and then you go into the kind of the hype cycle of, you know, development and eventually enterprise deployment. You know, the same with kind of major sort of policy trends. You know, if you look at, it's not that dissimilar, right? You could argue with all the sort of emergent excitement around defense tech today for both startups and investors over the last few years. But at the time, right, there was sort of a whole recalibration about, is our industry prepared to support the global war on terror? What does that look like? And, you know, how can we sustain this more efficiently? It was a time of a lot of questions and not necessarily a lot of answers. And so that was something that spurred me on, right, to not just continue to research with them, but also then to look into interning, as I mentioned, with Computer Sciences Corporation. So it wasn't MRAP's probably one clear signal, but it was something that I kept coming back to, and I found that there was just a lot of work and a lot of people with kind of the same questions.
Yeah, that's I mean, look, you sound like it was one of those experiences that there was like I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like there was an intellectual rigor and like challenge behind like what you were doing. There was you were doing it with great people, and it gave you room for examination and opportunities to what was ahead. I mean, is that kind of fair to say about, if you were to sum it up, to ultimately say, let me keep diving in?
Yeah, like, you know, I think one of the things I joke about sometimes with people is like, and this is true with startups, you know, and I'm guilty of this as much as the next person, but it is, anytime there's a new capability, new technology, a new policy problem, if you're not on the tech side, there's always, I think, a natural impetus to jump right into attempt to solution something. And it is so hard, right, to take either a step back or to find the right people with the perspective of, for lack of better words, what is there in that lit review, right? What's come before us, right, that maybe doesn't give us the answer, but highlights maybe some past lessons learned. And I think one of the benefits, kind of going back to that moment I was describing, is through that work with the research center, a lot of the early people that I interned with computer sciences, what all of those, you know, mentors or people that took time out of their day to help me along, was that it was a crash course, if you will, in, you know, how the entire industry and policy machine works, right? And that is something that, if left to my own devices or anyone's own devices, you can read, you can research, and you can learn. You can certainly learn a lot, but it's hard to truly grok, so to speak, right? To use that term specifically, it's hard to truly understand, right, and what's happening in front of you and what the context is and why something is or is not significant. And at the time, right, a lot of industry players, right, whether it was an MRAP or anything else, they did not have the capacity to people to scale up and meet demands that were impressed upon them, right? And so you saw this whole machine trying to change in real time. And that was something that is very clear. It's not just a question of money or acquisition needs, but it was also a whole very clearly highlighted, like, how plans and capabilities are deployed are changing. And that was a great sort of way to learn very quickly about even how just even small research projects should be viewed. And I take that today, like, how does that impact what I do today? Well, look how much our defense industry is changing now. And it's a super exciting time, but it also is, you know, it's great to remember some of those past lessons learned, right? About how do we do things that are in a cost sustainment fashion? How do we make sure that new technologies don't get trapped in sort of only pilot mode, right? How do we ensure that we're not having to re-architect entire systems anytime there's a new capability that comes out, right? So it doesn't, by the very nature of doing architecture, we don't accidentally block out new companies or new offerings that are coming online. Pat, like kind of what a lot of people in my time that were coming out of school learned, it doesn't necessarily, it's not the exact same as it is now, but there's a lot of cool lessons learned that I think can be derived in the current experience.
Yeah, I love it. You also touched on something, I think, too, that you spoke to a lot of the big changes that, like, you were in an environment where you had to think on your feet, make swift plans, sounds like operationalize things and people and movement. And, Ryan, you've worked in a number of leadership roles, like what you're doing today. We'll get there. But I'm just curious, as you think about some of the skills that you kind of picked up, right, in that time, how that's translated into your day-to-day today to over the last, decade. Like what have been the things that, when you look at that foundational experience as, in your research role, the things that you learn that are still applicable to now?
Yeah, I think one of the key takeaways, Brian, this may be a slightly unpopular statement, but certainly a lesson that I have carried ever since, right? Those early on experiences was that, details really matter, right? Like when you're new on a team or whatever your assignment was, this was true when I was an on-site engineer too, is that, well, there's a lot of things to learn and political dynamics to understand. Like it was at that time, right, my job to know or become the expert, if that term is appropriate, but certainly become very knowledgeable and responsible for whatever my tasks were, right? And it sounds so obvious, but it is so tempting, especially now, right? If you just look at the sheer volume of like events that are going on or meetups or new technologies or other things, it is easy to kind of just become overwhelmed sometimes at a calendar and or your event schedule or other things that are happening inside a company or an agency or a startup, wherever you're at. And a core lesson for me is that even early on is that to truly own whatever is assigned to me, and then incrementally grow from there, right? Because in anything you do, you have to build some sort of foundation of knowledge, right? And from that, trust, whether it's with the customer, with your internal dev teams. And it, like, as an example, in that early research projects, right? Understanding, right, the exact supply chain timeline for the equipment providers, right? That was in their core dependencies, right? Became something that, anyone could have done, but that was something I really took on. Right. And I remember early on in my career, my first project, right, when we were doing our first deployments, I owned, right, owned those deployment cycles. And so understanding how scheduling works, how to communicate that with the customer, to drive all that feedback back, right, to my management team. Like, these are things that they seem obvious, but it is tempting sometimes to spread oneself very wide and then become thin. And in anything we do, right, to really own to own one bit of knowledge and then expand from there, almost to, quote, I think everyone at some point will quote 0 to 1, right? But I love like so many people, I love the one quote where it's like, you kind of have a secret, but something that maybe others don't, even if it's an opinion. And in order to have that opinion, right, you have to work, right? You have to have your own research. You have to talk to a lot of people. You have to have some time in the bowels of whatever it is you're doing, right? Whether it's writing software or doing the research or whatever the case may be. And, how does that impact, how we work or how I work today? Well, like, for key initiatives or or core efforts, right, that we're launching, those details still matter, right? Now that is not just on me anymore. It's not just one assignment, obviously, but, understanding what our key milestones and holding ourselves to task, and equally, whether it's myself or our teams, to say, it's okay to say no to things that maybe are important, but are not essential, right, to our core task in terms of accelerating our product or enabling our customers or enabling our own teammates internal. And, the reason I highlight this, Brian, and I've seen it so many times, right, is just that it's so easy and tempting to say yes, especially when things can be exciting. And it is very hard to rack and stack things and say, here are the priorities and these other things are key, but they're not the most important things.
Yeah. It's, I think, a rare skill to be able to ignore the noise and focus in, and either you got to be good at it or work with people who are really good at it. Because, to stay on track and, take care of what matters most to protect everyone else is it's amazing that you, and it's funny, the reason I asked you that question, it's because I've definitely gotten the impression by everything you've shared that doing so and staying focusing, even if it's hard or it feels crappy behind the scenes, like probably might be something that you're quite good at, even if sometimes it doesn't always feel that way. So
I wish that were the case. Right? It is a maybe not 100%, but it is a learned skill. And you and I were chatting about this beforehand, right? But I'm a runner by background, and I still love to run, although I wish I had more time to do so. But I say that because I view some things through that lens, and it's a skill that's like your cardio, right? It's not static. It's highly dynamic. And if you're not constantly training, right, at least for me, maybe for others, it's very different, but at least for me, right, if you're not constantly training and refining it, then you lose it, or at least it depreciates some way, right? Because think about it, like, this is a scenario that anyone can relate to. People get busy, you're under pressure, you have a lot of conflicting priorities, and it's just, you could almost decide things through indecision, which is, I'll just kind of attack things as they come, or I'll try to hit it all as time allows. And as a result, right, you kind of have, you don't have that sort of northern star anymore about what's key for whatever it is, right? Key for a product or for just how you live your life. I know I have gone through this infinitum, right? And it's something, that I deal with even to this day, right? As something comes up, kids are sick, big deliverable at work, right? How do you rack and stack everything in your life and still kind of know that you didn't lose sight of the target? It's very hard to do, right? And it's some of my observation, right, going back to someone like Jack is, maybe no one's a master of it, but there are people who are pretty close, and he was pretty darn close to it. And so I try to draw inspiration from those folks.
You're saying, hey, there's a lot of competing life priorities in your business, at family, with like just your own self-discipline. But watching Jack, you felt or grasped from the outside, he was pretty good at getting it all done.
Oh, you bet. Like, watching people were like, and I wish I was better at this, but like, even for, he had so much stuff on his plate, and yet I was just, the kid trying to help out and learn. And, and he would be able to jump in. And when I presented stuff, for example, he'd still be able to say, all right, like, don't do any of the things you're doing. Like, you're burning a lot of time. Focus on these core things. Don't worry about anything else. Here's your task. Write it up. Get it back to me. Right. And that is someone, he's probably, who knows how much he was concept switching back then, but kind of be able to look at, even a pretty small contribution to what was, a broader effort, and be able to kind of tell me what the key things were and what the other things weren't. That's impressive, right? And that means to have that level of fidelity just for someone like myself, that tells me, right, he was really tracking a lot of different things. And, how this carries forward, right, into what I do now, right? It's certainly it's how I hold myself accountable, but also, people I work with, how can I help them, right? As they're balancing all their different priorities, whether they be at work or in their life.
Yeah. Sounds like Jack wasn't one who suffered from ADHD.
Yeah, I don't know. He wrote a ton of books, so he'd probably tell you he was running around doing.
Maybe. Yeah. It's interesting what you might see in someone else they don't see for themselves at all. So, the dilemma we all go through at times. What I wanted to ask you was, you talked about, for to take a tangent here, for your running passions, how many miles are we running a week? Like what's the Ryan Lewis running schedule?
Sometimes it's pretty grim, so not going to be throwing out too many Strava stats, but it like a lot of things, right? If you can get into a good rhythm and block it, right? I'm not naturally right a great long distance runner, but I think for me, if 3 to 5 times a week in the morning, right, before everyone's up, and usually before the sun's up, right, to get out and run. It's a great way, and do a little bit of strength training. It's a great way to come level set the day, right? Particularly if you've had, and I know, Brian, you've been going through this, right? If you have some late nights, even if you're beat, kind of when the alarm goes off, it's just a great way to get moving, in a day. So in a good month, right, I would love to say I'm hitting it 5 times a day or 5 times a week. But sometimes life gets in the way, and you're just happy if you can get out twice a weweek.
Understood. Well, you also have kids, you're running a business right now. I mean, you got a lot of priorities, that you got to attend to. So, 3 times a week, you got to give it to yourself. If you're a founder looking to grow without raising capital or giving up control, Relent is built for you. Founded by entrepreneurs who've scaled without outside funding, Relent helps companies find and retain talent, lower operational costs, and reinvest in growth. We've hired nearly 10 team members through Relent and streamlined our entire cost structure, freeing up capital to put toward what matters most. Even small teams can set up offshore operations quickly, compliantly, and without heavy infrastructure. With deep expertise in the India-US corridor, Relent combines cultural fluency with operational rigor and guides everything from team design to long-term scaling. Grow on your terms and start with Relent. To learn more, visit relent.team/arcbound. Ryan, I would love to know, if we can transition here, like what you stepped into a role to run a company. And I know it's been all consuming. You've been, putting some Herculean efforts in place, and you're starting to see some fruits of the labor. What are you doing right now? What's the role? And how are you, how are you doing what you're doing? Just give us an overview before we dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So, I've been, at Rancher Government Solutions, or RGS now, for almost, just a couple days over 5 months. And, it has been a great experience, right? In many ways, I am a first time, CEO. And so there's a lot to learn, but I would say the thing that makes it, not just exciting, but all possible is that, I'm not coming in, as employee number one, and we have just a great team, right? From both product, to our growth and sales team, all the way into operations, right? And so I count myself very fortunate on a daily basis to be able to not just work, with the broader team, but to lean on them a lot, right? As in some areas we accelerate a business, in other ways, right, we're completely launching new things, right? For those that maybe aren't on the DevOps side of the tech stack, Rancher started around 2014, right? As it became and still is one of the leading open source Kubernetes platforms, and RGS, right, has been developed or was stood up in 2020, 2021 as a specific implementation for serving the entire Kubernetes platform plus all of the hardened security requirements and support requirements to enable deployment into a wide variety of U.S. government or U.S. public sector use cases. And so what has been, so cool to watch and now be a part of, right, is to see the evolution of that software suite going from, I remember when containers first kind of came out and how exciting it was for a lot of developers to use it and just make their lives easier, and how much now containers have become a core part, right, of anyone's DevOps life cycle, right, for deploying new capabilities or new features. And now, and this extends to sort of a wide variety of use cases from, enterprise IT, which is, obviously pretty clear, but even into other use cases as well now, which is, enabling a, edge compute capabilities where you're having a data center like experience in a edge or disconnected environment, integrating, a wide variety of different types of platforms, right, as just another node in the network, right, that you're provisioning and monitoring. So that could be a government use case, anything to like what we've been experimenting with a couple different use cases with unmanned systems, whether they be on the ground or in the air, right? So what this core sort of development capability was started as is now merged into sort of a central part of this new tech stack that continues to evolve very dynamically. And so for us, right, we're a central part of that. And being able to meet, any of our customers kind of where they're at, whether they're doing a big migration and they're kind of looking for cost savings or adopting best practices, all the way toward the other end of the maturity spectrum, so to speak, where you have customers that are trying to rapidly deploy some of the latest and greatest AI offerings, and they're just looking for ways to streamline, ways to get those apps provisioned and deployed in the right type of environment with security monitoring. And so, we get to attack help our customers attack sort of a pretty diverse range of use cases, and the product suite enables us to do that.
Yeah. Wow. Seems super complex and dynamic. And it seems like these operational skills and these prioritization pieces, and you inherited, it sounds like a great team, and you just need to kind of put it together to work a little bit better. But give us like a tangible understanding. So like a type of customer, or if you can share a type of, the customer, I understand if you can't. And then like, okay, you're working with them, and then like you're moving your team to do X, right, for them. Like what give us like a in practice tangible result.
Yeah. So like a good example of this would be, even if you just go on our site or on some of our use cases where, we have supported in several government software factories, right? So these are organizations, right, that are designed to streamline the development, deployment, and sustainment of new capabilities into different government systems securely, right? And our core product suite, right, enables, right, the deployment of that into a wide variety of environments. So imagine you're an application developer, Brian, and you want to sell your app, and your first question is, all right, where can I deploy this thing? How do I do it? And some customers are have a singular cloud environment, others have multi-cloud environment, others may have cloud plus on-prem, and then, as I was mentioning, some may even have an edge requirement. And so right out of the gate, right, your app may be, of interest to a lot of end users, but now you have all these different dependencies, right, that you now have to consider, right, when you're deploying your offering. How do you do that in a meaningful way, right? How do you even know how to package everything up, make sure that it's fully compliant with whatever the security criteria are for all those different use cases I mentioned? right? And one of our core offerings, right, RKE2, right, is part of the broader Rancher suite, right, enables that. And so when we're looking at features, right, in terms of streamlining that experience, one of the core things that for anyone that's used a product that's great is having a very simple interface, right, that any administrator can use, where they're looking across a wide variety spectrum of whether it's I'm running this software suite in my cloud and on these on-prem nodes. I can see it all running. I can see what states they're running in, and I can very seamlessly deploy future environments in a declarative fashion, right? So I'm not having to manually put in all the different stipulations it takes to run your app. That's really cool, right? And it takes something that would normally do a ton of labor and makes it not only more secure, but also just makes it a lot easier to manage, right? And like when you're trying to deploy, kind of going back to that, central lesson, right, that I found is, what's the objective, right? The objective is not to have a perfect DevOps experience. The objective is to, in this case, or in this example, for you to deploy your app and to bring in new features to solve a problem for someone, right? And so anything that can remove the friction from that and potential risks from whatever of just mistakes or rapid updates or whatever the case may be, where we can have that in a very easy to manage interface, that's really compelling, right? And that is our piece of the pie when we talk about enabling other stakeholders to drive results for the mission.
Yeah. Wow. You speak, it's you're giving vibes of calm under pressure. But when you're talking about the detail, and I mean, even going back to focus of like, hey, here's what we build, why we build it, and like what this solves for our customers. It seems like you've been able to get in the weeds and develop a pretty strong, clear point of view on the focus on what needs to be built in a way that's going to be pragmatic and effective. Was that clear to you immediately when you walked into the role, or did it take a lot of digging to really uncover of like, where do we point the gun and ultimately be the most effective?
Yeah, I mean, certainly our product team, and the solution architectures team, right? It's something that has been, it's a tough question, right, Brian? Right, like it's somewhat of an evolving target. Right. But for us, right, especially as this where we're at, like we couldn't pick all the different features or development things we wanted to do. Right. And so, we had the team had a strong roadmap. And part of that, my role in that has been enabling it and then iterating over time as we collect customer feedback and we expand in some of these use cases from smaller deployments to pretty significant size, right? And so for us, right, yes, I think we had a kind of a clear idea in some of our products. For some, right, it was whole cloth, right, getting the voice of the customer and working backwards from some of the core problems, right, we have. And so that has been, one of the most exciting, but certainly one of the biggest tasks, right, for our team in the last couple of months since I've been on board. Right, because if you think about it, right, we can do everything from, or the discussion could be everything from like how do you support, your Linux implementation, all the way towards, how can we, wrap some of your apps, right, for, automated deployment. They're all interconnected things, right? But where do you spend your time, right? In terms of enhancing features. And so, the team had a good prioritization of that in place, and they've done a lot of hard work there. And for us, it's something that, we come back to on a regular basis, man, because it is amazing how much, right, the stack is moving, as you know. And for some customers, right, they're really forward leaning and they want to test a lot of stuff. So it is a continuous work in progress for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it sounds very iterative. You're on with the punches. You don't know everything perfectly, but you're adapting, and you're adapting under pressure in extreme environments. What is you, Ryan, as you look out your life, this company over the next few years, what do you see changing? What do you see staying the same?
Yeah, I think from the product side, or from kind of what we do, right? What I am, super excited what brought me here, and what I see remaining sort of core tenets for us, right, going forward, right, is continuing to offer customers the flexibility and the security, right, to kind of run sort of best in class DevOps offerings on really whatever they need, right? Like again, it sounds simple, but some of the best things do, right? In that, supporting the public sector for so long, right? There's always so many different use cases, right? And the ability for us to not lock customers in and to kind of evolve with them where we need to, it's a superpower, right? And that's something that is a core part of our DNA, and I don't see that changing. I don't want that to change, right? Our ability to work across whatever the tech stack is, wherever hardware stack is, kind of wherever the security requirements are, right? That is a key part of our company, and it's a key part of what drives a lot of our product decisions. I think where I am excited to see where things go is increasingly on enabling automation in some DevOps categories for whether right now the early test cases are probably in the edge environments, but across the spectrum, because particularly in a lot of our government agencies, you have a lot of groups that are working really hard, and they're asked to do even more with less, right? And just because as the mission grows or evolves, but their teams don't get to grow or evolve necessarily, or their expertise, right, in each individual technology just can't, right? It's just the very nature of FACE. And so our ability to continuously offer features that streamline transparency, make it easier for end users, right, to determine what they should deploy, what their security requirements are, right? Streamline bringing in new features or integrating with things like, as we're seeing a lot of customers now with more agentic-based workflows, right? In doing so, right, that still optimizes for cost, right? So you're not, you're not, completely blowing out, right, your cost budget with a new capability. That is where I see us going more and more in our product suite and growing and learning with the customer.
Got it. Yeah. First, I mean, I like that you have such, I mean, it seems like you, again, I think the through line throughout this entire conversation, and maybe you wouldn't say so for yourself because it's hard to see what people are seeing you, but I do think like the focus, the prioritization set, what you learned in your first research assistant experience, like that kind of drumbeat, it seems from my perspective, it's kind of carried through in all that you do, even if you don't do it all perfectly the way you want. And I think, you're operating in very complex environments and technical environments, and not everything's going to go as planned. But it seems like you are doing a pretty strong job as you've entered into this company and giving it some life and legs to be something great. And I'm really excited to follow the journey. It's been amazing meeting you. I feel like you got a lot of charisma and you're super thoughtful. And I am excited to stay in touch. Ryan, where can people find you, find Rancher, and get involved in your orbit?
You bet. Well, yeah, Brian, it's been great talking to you. And, certainly, a lot of the credit goes out to our team. I'm one member of it, but it's exciting when you get kind of a lot of very highly skilled people all kind of going in the right direction. And so, big shout out to all of them. To find out more about us, I'm most active on LinkedIn. We do our company. If you just look us up, RGS, we'll do a monthly roundup right? So you can kind of get a sense of all the things. That includes our product updates, other feature updates, as well as things that we're doing out in industry or at other technical meetups. We're going to have a couple regional meetups coming up soon. And one may be out in your neck of the woods, Brian, but we'll certainly have one out in the Colorado area, one here in the DC area, and then certainly one in Florida as well. So when you look at the site, you'll see more information there. What we don't have on that site, Brian, but I will just handle it direct, is you can't get our cool swag direct. Maybe I think we need to figure out how to get that on the site so people can buy it. But in the interim, I will make sure that whether we're hanging out or we're doing another show or you're talking with one of our leaders on the team for a future episode, that we get you some cool swag.
Amazing. I'd love to rock some Rancher swag. It would be great. So appreciate you looking out. If you put it up on the site, let me know. But Ryan, this is a pleasure, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you for joining us for this reflective conversation with Ryan Lewis. Today, we traced the moment a young grad student stepped into a research center and then knowingly stepped into his life's work. We heard how the urgency of the MRAP program shaped his understanding of technology, policy, and mission, and how lessons in rigor, prioritization, and context became the backbone of his leadership style. Ryan shared what it means to focus under pressure, to build discipline like endurance training, and to lead teams through complexity with clarity. We explored his current chapter at Rancher Government Solutions, where he's helping government teams deploy modern software securely and efficiently across environments that change by the day. If today's episode brought you into inspiration, please share it with someone who'd enjoy it and leave us a review. Remember, new episodes come out every Tuesday and Friday. We'll see you next time.